This video is sponsored by TT Combat. I love a good wargame, but have you ever wanted to fit more wargame into your wargame? I guess one way to go about it is Apocalypse, a mega battle played over several tables and sometimes several days. But the other way to go about it is playing around with scale. This is a 32mm Black Templars miniature. Also, Games Workshop 32 is a skosh bigger than your average 32. But this is an epic scale Space Marine. Same exact guy, but a little smaller. Actually, quite a bit smaller. I also have some minis for the game Oasis, a slightly larger scale than Epic, but as you can see, a gaggle of troopers, some mechs and walkers. All of this fits into pretty much the same size as this one Space Marine. Scale is a really fun way to experience something new in the world of miniature wargaming. It's something I've only dipped my toes into, but I'm ready to dive in head first. And TT Combat has sent me a pre-production copy of their new 2-player starter set for the game Dropzone Commander, the medium game in their Commander universe. There's Drop Fleet Commander, the ship-to-ship naval game in space, which I have played, Dropzone Commander, which I've always had my eye on, and there's another game called Strike Team Commander, kind of a Mama Bear, Papa Bear, Baby Bear kind of thing going on. Although technically Strike Team Commander is a much smaller game, but it's on a much bigger scale, like Infantryman versus Infantryman, where Drop Fleet Commander is a bigger game, but it's on a much, much smaller scale. I don't know, it's a little weird to think about, but this game is 10mm science fiction carnage. This 2-player starter set has a similar amount of plastic to other starter sets I've gotten, but the smaller scale means there's a lot more units in here than a typical wargame. And already looking at these little guys, they are adorable. The forces in this box are the UCM, the United Colonies of Mankind. In the Commander universe, aliens conquered Earth and pushed humanity away, so now humans have banded together with a singular purpose to retake Earth. These guys are my jam. One of the forces preventing humans from achieving this goal is the other half of the box, the Bioficers. These guys are high-tech, warlike aliens who kinda look like computer parts, and fight like computer parts. I haven't had much experience working in a smaller scale, so I want to eat dessert first and build up the little guys. These are so small and there's almost no mold lines to clean up. And you glue multiple guys to a base, specifically 5 guys, like the burger joint. Even though each guy is a single piece of plastic, there's still some variety to be had in where each pose goes on the base. After putting together 6, I feel like I got some pretty good variety out of these. The Bioficer infantry are very similar. They're a smidge taller with bigger guns, and there's 6 Bioficer drones and then 4 sets of Bioficer hulks. These guys are a little unique, with each carrying a heavy weapon, and it's only 3 to a base, so there are these round plugs that fit into the unused slots. That's all the infantry built, but it didn't take too long, and technically, it is tons of miniatures. I've assembled all of the miniatures that come in the box. 82 miniatures spread across 18 bases, so I guess technically it'd probably be 18 miniatures. And look at these little fellas, they're so cute. Now let me know in the comments below, does this little tray of 5 guys count as 5 miniatures or 1 miniature? I guess I'd probably lean towards 1 miniature. I guess it only really matters for my spreadsheet of every model I've ever painted, but just a bunch of little guys. And it didn't take too long to assemble. Now onto the vehicles. I'm starting out with the UCM vehicles first. I think I'm gonna collect the UCM as my drop zone army, so I wanna make sure that this all gets done. The scimitar tanks are super easy, just a single piece of plastic. And these little car things are called polecat buggies. The instructions call for 4 built with the artillery-looking guns and 2 built with the dual miniguns. Then there is the main battle tanks, probably the most iconic UCM vehicle, the Saber tanks. These might look small, and that is because they are. In lore, they are single-pilot vehicles, and with weapon systems on extendable arms so they can stay safely behind cover and then shoot up over top. 3 of these get railguns, and 3 got the AA gun options. That's all the ground forces finished, now onto the air wing. The game's namesake, the dropships, and the UCM has the most dropships. These 2, the Condor dropships, are actually not the biggest available to the UCM, and each can carry 3 Saber tanks. Then there are the Vultures. Smaller carriers, one is outfitted for troops and the other has its loading arms open for vehicles. This little fella is the Falcon gunship, and the same ship reconfigured for transport is the Raven dropship and troopship. Transportation is something that's in most wargames, but it's a really big deal in Dropzone Commander. It's in the name. And physically, the carriers can carry their cargo, which is a nice touch. I kinda wanna get some more of these figs so I can load up these transports. That's all the UCM built, and physically this is a really small footprint, but it's actually a huge force of miniatures. Moving over to the alien half of the box, the Bioficers have a really different vibe. Their tech isn't crude, so you don't have to worry about crew compartments or windows. These little origami looking things are Thorn light skimmers, and there are 6 of these guys floating around. Then I moved on to the Grievance generator arcs. This box has 2 of these, and that's kind of the flagship of the Bioficers. It's called the Generator because it generates their infantry. It's literally a Battlefield 3D printer that can assemble some troops as needed, and it gives the Bioficers the ability to pick what units they want in the moment instead of in the list building step. After those guys, it was time for the Tangent Support Skimmers. 2 of them got the Tesla-looking weapons, and the rest got the dual cannons. I think these are my favorite, they remind me of crabs. That's the Bioficer ground forces, now for their air vehicles. The Bioficers also have very unique looking ships because their tech is so advanced, they don't have very readable looking ships. Their stuff is function over form. The biggest ships are the Device Dropship and the Silence Heavy Gunship, and these guns are huge. Then there are the Data Strike Dropships, little paper airplane looking fellas that are almost cute. Then the Digital Light Dropships and the Gyro Air Generator. Like the Grievance tank, this guy can also assemble more assets as needed. Now everything is built, I just have a little bit more basing to do. And at this tiny scale, I don't think I can use my regular texture paste. It would be out of scale. I thinned down some white glue and then spread it all over the ground. This fills in the cracks where the models fit into their slots. Then I sprinkled on a little bit of fine grained sand, and then I gave each base just a little splash of some coarse sand, just from some irregularity in the ground. For the majority, I dusted on some baking soda. This should give me some ultra-fine particles that'll hopefully look like super fine earth. I also experimented with plaster. This should be even finer than the baking soda, but I had trouble with clumping. It didn't want to pour nicely like the baking soda. I eventually got into the groove of glue, then a little bit of sand, then a little coarse sand, and then for fun, I threw on just a little bit of plaster before finishing off each base with a dunking of baking soda. I left these for a little bit for the glue to set up, and then I gave each one a blasting of air with my airbrush to knock off any loose material so they were ready for paint. That's both halves of this box built, and it's a lot of very small models. I've put together every single miniature in the box. The total comes to 68 miniatures. I feel like it was a real missed opportunity to not include one more model, but this is still pretty wizard. An entire table full of little itty bitty guys. I have a little tiny bit of experience painting in smaller scales, and I assume that this is gonna paint up a lot faster than a typical wargaming army. I mean, the more mass, the longer something takes to paint typically. Although, even though each individual guy is absolutely tiny, it is quite a bit of stuff, but I'm still very hopeful that I can get playing with this stuff pretty quick. And speaking of getting playing, even though I have a massive terrain collection, it's all 32mm terrain, and if I fudge it a little, I could probably do 28 as well. This box does come with some paper terrain in a 10mm scale. That looks decent and gets the job done. But there are other things that can also get the job done. If you're like me, you bought into a new wargame in a smaller scale and you want to get playing immediately. Well, if you want a great looking game board perfectly scaled to your new minis, look no further than TT Combat's Chroma. This is color printed MDF scenery that is both hard wearing and stunning in appearance. No need to spend hours painting, just a little assembly and you have a whole new world ready for your miniatures to ravage. And the smaller scale means that this terrain represents a larger chunk of the battlefield. Entire skyscrapers, hospitals, manufacturing centers, things you would normally only see the crumbling remains of. This terrain is made of sturdy MDF board, and with its clever engineering, Chroma is able to pack these pieces with lots of detail. Each of these buildings are sold separately, and there is the Downtown District terrain set that features a huge selection of Chroma terrain sets and lets you populate a 4x4 board. Painting up a ton of minis is fun, painting up a ton of terrain can be a little bit of a chore. The Chroma terrain is a great way to cut down on prep time and get right to gaming. If you're interested in this terrain, you can check it out linked in the description below and get it for yourself when it releases on August 21st. The UCM, the United Colonies of Mankind, or the Bioficers. Humans or aliens? I feel like the humans are gonna paint up a little quicker, but the Bioficers are gonna be a little more interesting. Although the thing I'm really chomping at the bit to paint is the little duders, so I think I gotta start there. I have a soft spot for the humans in the Commander universe. I mean, I'm a human, and they're also the underdogs of the setting. I blasted my troopers with a white prime. There are 2 different types, the Legionary Infantry and the Praetorian Infantry. I want to give the Legionary the classic green army look, but first I think it'll be easier to paint up these bases. If I get any splashes on the infantry, I can fix that up later. I started out putting down a wet coat of deep gray. I want some urban rubble bases. Then I thinned down some Banshee brown and I dripped this all around, thinning it out with some water to add some warmth. Then I wanted to bump up the contrast, so I dripped down some noble skin and I pushed it around with some extra water to get some more contrast in the recesses. Now I can paint the fellas. I started out with algae green. These guys are so small, I kinda had to put this on everywhere. I feel like this brought out details that I wasn't even aware of. And speaking of those details, I base coated the guns with iron hull gray, and then I used deep gray and uniform gray for the highlights. It might seem crazy to highlight on these tiny little guns, but I feel like it was worth it. It added some nice texture and readability to these microscopic weapons. Then for the skin, I used topaz skin and demonic yellow for the accents. This topaz skin is basically a brown, but it has excellent coverage, so I could easily hit these spots with one coat, which was essential. It was hard to get into the nooks and crannies, so only doing everything once was worth it. Then for each commander, I painted one shoulder pad yellow and I put a stripe on his helmet. Then for each rocket launcher, I painted a band of yellow around the front and back. The last detail is their little lenses, and I used Imperial Navy and Arctic Gem. These colors are pretty intense, but on such a small area, I needed to go hard to make these spots readable. A darker base coat and then a stripe of a lighter blue for a reflection. That's my Legionaries all done, and I really like how they turned out. Now for the Praetorians, I want them to have a more Special Forces feeling. I gave these guys a base coat of Occultist Cloak, then I used the same colors to finish them up. Seeing them side by side, they do have a different feel to my rank and file troopers, and that is a lot of minis all painted up. I've got all the UCM infantry painted up, and look at my little army dudes. This right here is 40 guys. It's so weird, like looking right here and seeing all of this. It's a different flavor of wargaming than I'm used to. So many little tiny fellas. In terms of painting, it was a little bit of a challenge to get all the paint in all the exact right spots. But it was a lot of fun. I could paint some more little army dudes right now. But actually, right now, it is time to work on all of the other little UCM pieces. There are a lot of vehicles to get through, and I'm really feeling like I want to paint up all the UCM. I hit everybody with a white prime, and then for my color, I decided to go with camouflage green. This is a little lighter than army green, but I'm planning on darkening it up later. I gave everything I wanted green, 2 thin coats of this, and then for some highlights, I mixed together titanium white and raw sienna ink into my airbrush, and I blasted this over the spots on my tank to make some focal points. With this tiny scale, I want to work in as much interest as I can, so that even at this tiny scale, there's still plenty to look at. After this inking, I sealed everything with some satin varnish in preparation for some washing. I grabbed the algae green again. I used the same color for my infantry, but this time over the green base coat, it'll appear darker. I feel like speed paint is essential at this scale. It would be crazy to try and use a brush to pick out every single little detail on these tanks. Once the speed paint was dry, I did a dry brushing ice yellow to edge highlight and brighten up all my tanks just a little bit. Then I used some 2 thin coats of plate armor to base coat all the metal. This color covers really well, so I could get away with 1 coat on everything. Then I used some grim black speed paint over the wheels and treads. This color is pretty dark, so it didn't matter that there was some airbrushing overspray and spilled wash. This covered it right up. Then I took some Army Painter Dark Tone and I put this over the metal, and I also dripped this into some of the details like the vents to make them darker. Finally, I was painting the cockpits and I decided to use the same colors I used for my infantry's goggles, Imperial Navy and Arctic Gem. Having the same colors on everything will help it feel like a unified fighting force. In the Commanderverse, all of humanity is dedicated to the war effort, so they have a lot more of everything than the other factions, which helps offset that their tech is much lower. After the canopies, I took some fiery vermilion red paint and I dotted all the little lenses. And that is most of the ground forces, but not all of them. I kept all of the chain gun stuff ungreened. I feel like I want these pieces to match my special forces guys. I started out base coating these with a light gray in preparation for some more occultist cloak. I think the gray base coat will leave these guys darker than it would look over a white. And it also let me spray on some highlights of white ink so that I could still get some variation in hue with these base coats. I threw on a satin varnish and then it was time for paint. I thinned down this color about 50-50 and applied it quick so it had time to settle in the recesses and tint the raised areas. For the AA guns, I wanted to do some camouflage, so I grabbed Brigadine Brown and I started painting on some blobs and stripies. This is a slightly darker hue than the occultist cloak, so it'll be visible but subtle. Then I highlighted these brown spots with some bootstraps brown to make some of the high spots brighter. With the camo on there, I gave everything a dry brushing of ash gray. That's the base coats all done, and I finished these up exactly like the last ones, and I think they add some nice contrast to the rest of the force. Now for the dropships. When I get into a new wargame, I always want a new experience. Dropzone Commander is all about dropping into zones, and the UCM has the most dropships of any faction. For my flyers, I flipped them all upside down and I gave their tummies a base coat of bony spike, and I also put this on the cargo bays as well. Then I shaded these areas with some raw sienna ink, then I mixed some white into the sienna and I sprayed this on the same sorts of highlights I did for the tanks. Then came the process of glazing thinned down algae green over everything. My ratio was 1 drop of algae green for every 2 drops of medium. I slobbered this over everything, and while it was drying, I used pallid bone on all the tummies. After that, it was time for the metal. I base coated all the intakes and exhausts with some 2 thin coats plate armor, and I washed these with some dark tone. Each individual vehicle came together pretty quick, but there was so much to do it took a little bit to hit everything with each step. For the doors of my cargo containers, I painted the doors yellow and then gave them some hazard stripes. My troops need to be able to spot these so that they can stand clear. Then I gave all the containers a sponging ice yellow to make them look well worn. Finally, it was time to paint the cockpits, and once again I grabbed my blue colors and I painted these with some glazing and edge highlights to make them look shiny. Having 1 spot of blue brings a lot of attention to the face of these planes. That's them all painted, now I can finally assemble them. I used super glue to stick my halves together, and now I can build the flight stands. Dropzone Commander uses these clear acrylic stands, and to get them perfect, I like to ream out the openings a little so they can perfectly accept the flight stand pegs. Then to glue these on, I use some weld bond. This is an extra strength white glue and it dries crystal clear. I put some glue into my hole and then onto my pegs and then stuck these together. Then I added another to the underside of my planes with some super glue. I like to have a peg on the top and bottom so that I can completely disassemble these models when I need to. I decided to clip down some of the pegs on the smaller flyers so my Condor dropships can hover over them. Then with everything glued, I now have a new army. I now have a UCM, United Colonies of Mankind, army. This is a lot of stuff. Like in a typical game of 40k, I'll bring like 10 to 14 Space Marine units, but this is 30 units. And it fits all nice and neat on my desk. I can't get over the scale of these guys. They're so little. It's so trippy to see right in front of me, all in my eye line, my infantry, my tanks, my main battle tanks, my flyers, my hovercraft, my dropships. Like the entire army is so small. This is the UCM, the United Colonies of Mankind, kinda the normal army. These guys always have the exact right tool for the job, and the tricky part is using the dropships to make sure that the perfect tool is in the perfect spot. I'm excited to learn the game with these guys, but there is another half of the box, the loner army, or at least that's what I'm going to use the bioficers for. Sean can play those. Really, I just wanted to paint up some more little fellas. For the bioficer infantry, I mixed together ashen stone and warrior skin for a desaturated purpley color, and I put this on over their machine-crafted flesh. These might look like little aliens, but they're actually fleshy drones. No brains in these guys, they are puppeteered elsewhere. And you know what else is flesh crafted? That's right, our website. On EonsOfBattle.com, we have all sorts of hobby goodies. Gamer Grass Tufts, Great Head Studio Bits for your Space Marines, Army Painter paints, brushes, basing cork, ultra thin and ultra thick super glue, and we've got terrain. It's the best way to support us doing what we do by getting a membership. Each month, members get a credit good for any one terrain pack we've ever made, or the brand new one. This August, we have created the Deadly Swamp Bits pack, a set of natural terrain bits to help set your miniatures in a perilous natural environment. There are some rock walls and fallen logs for figures to take cover behind or stand proudly on, and also included are some small bits for adding natural details to your minis' bases and spooky trees for blocking line of sight. All these bits are perfect for scatter, and if you arrange these parts in a circle, you can make some very ominous pools of water. This set was designed by us and is available at EonsOfBattle.com. Once the skin was dry, I took some fiery vermilion and I base coated the guns. This was tricky. They're very small, but working slow with a brush, I was able to get the paint only in the right spots. Then for some accents on the guns, I used Ducat Gold. These alien drones carry some very powerful guns, and the Hulks have even bigger guns. After these two base coats, I gave each gun a wash of just warrior skin speed paint, and then I picked out the little triangle solar panels with some black paint. And I also dotted all of their eyes. Then came the craziness. I took some uniform gray and I edge highlighted all of the little solar panels. These are tiny, but I feel like it adds a lot to see these perfectly picked out. On the Hulks, I primed the business end of their weapons with some white paint, and then I used some rainforest for the energy glow. Just like that, I have a legion of aliens for my UCM to fight against. The Bioficers are a new faction in the world of the Commander universe, and they're a little bit like the Tyrannid from 40k. Even though they resemble like the classic gray aliens, a little bit more fire in the sky than XCOM 1, but the way that they actually do war is very similar to the Tyrannid, where they can reconfigure themselves based on what's needed in the actual conflict. The Tyrannid are a hive mind, and the Bioficers are an AI, specifically a war AI. It's unknown if it's been sent out into the galaxy to just cause chaos or if it defeated its creators, but whatever the case is, it's in the world of Dropzone Commander and it's just fighting everybody. Having painted up this box, I think I've discovered that I am a UCM player, although I did just have to get some paint on the Bioficer infantry. I've discovered something with these little tiny fellas. It's just really rewarding to paint them, because even though it's technically, 10 Bioficers versus the 8 infantry bases for the UCM, it just feels exciting to look at this and to see like 35 dudes versus 30 human infantry. It's like a whole little battle scene, and it's so small. The Bioficers are the newest faction in the Commander universe, and it makes the situation for the United Colonies of Mankind that much more dire, because it's not looking good. These guys want to be fighting the Scourge, and the Scourge are body snatcher aliens, and so it's humans fighting those humans that have already been captured and assimilated by the Scourge. And now they're dealing with endless waves of 3D printed flesh machinations from a crazed warlike AI. It's a rough time. When I first got into Drop Fleet Commander, I started with the UCM just because I really liked the kind of sleek look of the ships. It was almost like Halo-esque. And now that I've gotten to paint up another flavor of the UCM, the ground forces, it does feel really right. And I kind of want to add a little bit of resistance as a little more humanity spice. Really into these guys. I'm going to continue to tinker with the Bioficers. Whenever you're getting into a new wargame, it's always nice to have a loner army. And now I have a proper army, and the only thing standing between me and Dropzone Commander is finishing reading the rules, so I think I'll work on that now. Thanks for watching.